The Florida Gators did something last week that should reassure all of you about their commitment to competing at the very highest level. And I know that there are going to be some strong opinions on this. And listen, I welcome them all down in the comments. So at the end of this video, leave me a comment. Let's talk about it. I know you all are going to feel all types of ways about this. But okay, so what happened? UF increased their recruiting budget by 45%. That is a jump from $2 million to almost $2.9 million this year for Napier. So, what does that mean? Well, it means UF has a whole heck of a lot more money to spend. And, in the era that we are in college football, it's glitz, it's glam, it's bigger, better, right? So if Florida wants to compete for the top recruits in the country, they need as big a recruiting budget as they possibly can. But I'll tell you what it means to me. It means that the narrative that's out there that UF is cheap, that's a false narrative. That is gone, right? And I think that also the idea that, we're just going to save money, save it up for the next coach, that's out the window as well. UF is opening their wallet and spending now because they believe in and are bought into what Billy Napier is building at Florida and this staff, right? I think that that's a sign that Billy Napier has maybe a little bit longer leash than some of us thought that he had, right? And I get it. I know exactly what you guys are going to put in the comments too. We're going to have a million people that say, well, obviously Scott Strickland is doing this because he knows that his job is tied to Billy Napier's job. So he wants Napier to be successful so that he can save his own skin. And listen, I follow that line of thinking, but this is what I'll tell you. I find it very hard to believe that the decision to increase the recruiting budget by 45% is something that Strickland could do on his own. I really likely think that this decision came from above his head. I would assume that bigger the more powerful people had influence on this increase. It was not a decision that Scott Strickland got to make on his own, which makes me think that the university as a whole, that would be the president of the university, the board of trustees, the powers that be, the big donors, are all invested in what Napier is doing. And they want to see Florida be successful sooner rather than later. And guys, I think that that's a great sign. Just before we go on, I want to give some love to Meldon Law. If you are in Gainesville or Ocala, Fort Lauderdale, or Lake City, or you're in a car accident, a truck, motorcycle accident, your consultations with Meldon Law are absolutely free. They have been serving Florida since 1971. They are our proud partner, and they are a supporter of all Florida Gator athletics. You may not need them today, but if you do later on, make sure you remember to reach out to Meldon Law. You can follow them on social media. All of the links are in the description of this video. And guys, they do contests and ticket giveaways all the time. So make sure that you're following them so that you can enter and you can win those things. I appreciate Meldon Law so much for the support, not only that they show us and this channel here, but the Florida Gators as well. All right. Last video, we talked about whether or not they were going to give Napier enough time. We talked about what Dan Mullen said that they needed to do. And basically, that's get out of the rut of firing a coach every 3 years. One of the things that Coach Mullen talked about was the fact that the university has to decide that they're all in on somebody, right? And then you have to continue to go through the growing pains to allow that coach to see his plan of action all the way through. We have been in this cycle, honestly, since Urban Meyer left, where every 2.5 to 4-ish years, Florida is searching for a new head coach. This time, maybe we're going to do it differently. In the last video, I talked about how the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. This recruiting budget increase shows me that Florida is trying to do things differently than they have in the past. I know that coaches prior to Coach Napier wanted a larger recruiting budget. When Coach Napier was hired, he asked for a larger recruiting budget than Florida had previously had, and he got it. But now he got another 45% increase. I really think that that shows that Florida is serious about trying to make this plan come to fruition. They are serious about Florida competing for SEC and national championships. But before we ever get to that point, they are serious about Florida being in it and competing for the top recruits in the country. We know the type of recruiter that Billy Napier is. We know that if this was not the NIL era, I would assume that Coach Napier has a top 3 class almost every single year. That is how good he is with recruits and parents. But now we've moved into this NIL era, this era where players want everything bigger, better, flashier. And if Florida wants to compete, they needed that bigger budget. And, I think that this is a sign Florida's willing to be patient. They are willing to give Napier every chance they possibly can to be able to succeed. And, will he ultimately be successful? Time is going to tell at this point, right? But I think what UF is trying to do is, at the end of the day, they want to say that they have done everything they possibly can to give Napier the opportunity to win at Florida, the opportunity to be successful. I think that if we can get the powers that be within the UAA to fully get on board with pushing donors to NIL, coupled with the fact that the recruiting budget that UF does pay for has increased by 45%, which I do think it's important to clarify. This increase in 45% cannot go to NIL. Currently, it is against the law for a university to pay its athletes. So this 45% increase is not something that can just be given to Florida Victorious. It's not something that can be used to subsidize players in any way. So it's going to go to things like the events that recruits come to, their visits when they come on visits, their in-game experience. That's the kind of thing, to fly coaches across the world, across the country, to pay for those plane trips. That's the kind of thing that this budget is going to do. It is not going to help us in the NIL space, but it is still a huge help accomplishing the goals that Coach Napier has in front of him. Now, if the university can couple that with a full-on embrace of NIL, when a big donor calls and says, hey, I've got $1 million that I'd like to earmark to sports, where should it go? That they say, hey, I think you should go ahead and give Florida Victorious a call because they could really use it. That is when Florida will really be able to dominate once again. But this is a huge step in the right direction for the program, and honestly, a huge vote of confidence for Coach Napier from the powers that be, those guys above Scott Strickland. So this has to make Napier pretty excited. If he's ultimately successful at UF, props to the university for giving him the time and the resources to get it done. And if he's not, no one is going to be able to say that it was because UF held him back. All right, guys, we did it. We hit 10,000 subscribers. Thank you so much to everybody who hit that button. If you have not subscribed yet, why not? Click it right now. I appreciate all of you guys' support. This has been such a fun journey, and I am so excited for all of the exciting things that are yet to come. Thanks for tuning in, and as always, go Gators.